I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. We have Alicia Butler-Pierre. She is the founder and CEO of Equilibria, a 15-year-old operations management consulting firm. Her career in operations began over 20 years ago while working in various chemical plants and oil refineries. She invented a framework for business infrastructure and authored the two-time bestseller, Behind the Facade, How to Structure Company Operations for Sustainable Success. It's the world's first published book on business infrastructure for small businesses. Alicia hosts the weekly Business Infrastructure podcast with a global audience across 35 plus countries, and her combined online content has over 500,000 downloads. That is just awesome. Alicia, welcome. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It's great to be here, and thank you to Jody, Donalisa, and Dewana for making this possible. I'm here in Atlanta, so thanks to COVID, we're able to have this presentation remotely. And today we're going to talk about some of the implications of taking your business remote. Even if you aren't in business currently, I think you're going to walk away with some nuggets of information that you can definitely take into consideration as you start to build up your new business. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a presentation to share with all of you. So specifically, we're going to talk about kind of peeling back the curtain and taking a look at what it means to digitize your business. I know for so many of us, we're hearing these terms, going remote, going virtual, digital transformation, but what does it all really mean? And beyond that, what does it actually look like? So those are some of the things that we're going to unpack today. So I have a picture here of Rip Van Winkle. And if any of you are familiar with that story from Washington Irving, Rip Van Winkle is a character who falls asleep after drinking an alcoholic beverage. And when he wakes up, 20 years have passed by and he's discombobulated. He's trying to figure out his way in the world. And I call what all of us have experienced as a result of this pandemic the Rip Van Winkle effect, especially as it relates to the things that we've had to educate ourselves on at rapid speed and rapid adoption as a result of the pandemic, primarily all of these different digital technologies. So you'll see here over here in the lower right-hand corner, I have here that overnight we've all become sound editors, lighting technicians, videographers, photographers. Some of us have even become therapists because we're all trying to figure our way out around all of this. Even in me setting up for this presentation today, I have lighting in the background. I have to make sure that my sound is correct. I have a webcam. These were all things that I had to bring myself up to speed on very quickly, as I'm sure so many of you joining right now have. But just so I can get a sense of where we all are, I'd like to first ask you, this is our first poll question. So Donalisa, if you wouldn't mind putting this poll up there. I'm curious to know, of everyone who's on the line right now, how many of you are actually already in business? Do you already have a business? So go ahead and answer yes or no, just so I can get a sense of how to frame the rest of this talk this morning. Okay, so 74% of you have answered yes and 26% have answered no. Okay, well, everybody's going to take away something valuable, some valuable information, I promise you. But it just gives me a better understanding of how to frame up some of the things that we'll be talking about. Now, speaking of the Rip Van Winkle effect, I'm not sure if any of you have actually seen or heard this quote. It was said earlier this year, right as we were going through a shutdown because of COVID around our country, across America. But this quote came from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, and he said, "We've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in only 2 months." So think about that. Again, this rapid rate of acceleration when it comes to our learning curves, as well as this accelerated adoption, much of which honestly has been forced on many of us, whether we like it or not. It's here and we've had to adapt and adapt very quickly. So why we're here, why I'm giving this presentation. As Tracy mentioned, I talk exclusively about business infrastructure, and you'll see in a couple of slides what that is and how to actually implement business infrastructure in your business. Even if you don't have a business yet, it's something for you to definitely give some thought and consideration to as you start to craft the idea for your new business. But again, I have a book that I've written about business infrastructure, a weekly podcast. I actually consult about business infrastructure also. But that's not why we really should be meeting today. We really should be meeting because when it comes to business infrastructure, it's really laying the groundwork for the people, the processes, and the tools and technologies that you need to take a look at as you start to go through this digital transformation for your business. Now, here's what we're going to cover specifically today. We're going to talk a little bit more about what business infrastructure actually is. I'm going to share with you some common processes that you should consider. So regardless of what type of business, what type of industry you're in, we're going to then cover 7 major tips for digitization. There's so many to cover, but I tried to think of like the top 7. And then we'll follow up with some Q&A. So if you have some questions along the way, again, as Tracy mentioned, feel free to start typing those questions out, and we will definitely make sure that we get as many of them, if not all of them, answered before we wrap up today. I would like to go ahead at this time and Donna Lisa, if we can, put up that second poll question. I'm curious to know, for those of you who have businesses, what type of business do you have? Is it retail? Are you in the nonprofit space? Do you have a manufacturing company, professional services, or does it kind of fall in some type of other category? Okay, professional services, and that's definitely the bucket that my company falls in. So this is also good information for me to know in framing up some of the things that we'll be talking through. So business infrastructure. When most people hear the word infrastructure, 2 things usually come to mind, or one of 2 things, I should say. People either think of transportation, or they may even think of something in terms of technology. So this image that you see right here, this is an ideal example of what we mean by transportation infrastructure. You have these different modes of transportation. You have train, boat, airplane, car. Basically, infrastructure is tying all of these different modes of communication together so that people and goods can move about as seamlessly and as efficiently as possible. Now let's take that same concept and apply it to our businesses or the business that you're going to start. So when it comes to business infrastructure, we're talking about linking the people, the processes, and the different tools that are needed to keep your company going and to keep information and work flowing as seamlessly and as efficiently as possible. The reason I wanted to make sure that I explained first what business infrastructure actually is because as we talk through some of these different tips, we're going to specifically talk about the different types of people that you may want to rely on. If you can, hire some of these people, some of the processes that you need to think through as you start to digitize your operations, and then the different tools. And what I mean by tools are not just digital technologies such as software, but also what is the equipment that you need to be using? Are there special types of furniture that you also need to be incorporating into your day-to-day activities and operations? Now, 4 questions that you always want to keep in mind when it comes to your digital operations. What work needs to be done? How is that work actually organized? Who is going to perform that work? and how is that work performed? So remember, we were talking about people, processes, and tools and technologies. So the process piece is covered by the first and the last questions. What work needs to be done and how is that work performed? When we think of a process, think of it also as a step-by-step procedure. You're not only identifying the work that needs to be performed or all of the different tasks and activities that need to be done, but you then take it a step further and let people know how to actually do that work. So when you document that how to, that's what we're referencing as a process. Now, as far as how that work is actually organized, that comes into play with some of the tools and technologies that you'll be leveraging, excuse me. And then as far as who will actually be doing the work, that's that people component. And it's so important to make sure that you assign the right people to do certain things. Just because you can doesn't always mean that you should. And just because certain people are easily available and accessible doesn't necessarily mean that they possess the skills that may be needed to perform certain tasks. So just keep these 4 questions in mind also as we start to talk through some of these different digitization tips. This is a rather busy slide, and don't worry about taking notes because I'm definitely going to let you know where you can download a copy of this presentation. But I wanted to point out, remember that question on the previous slide, how is the work organized? What we have here are 6 main functional areas. For some of you, these areas may also be equivalent to the departments that make up your company. So what we have here is operations, legal compliance, technology, accounting, marketing, and human resources. These are 6 areas, regardless of whether you have a nonprofit, a manufacturing, professional services, retail company, or some other type of business. Your business activities encompass all of these different areas. I'm not going to go through every single one of these processes, but wherever you see a yellow star, just know that that is something that we will touch on throughout the rest of this presentation this morning. So when we talk about operations, this is literally what does it take? What activities, what tasks are you performing to actually deliver your product or your service on a day-to-day basis? That's literally the heart and soul of your business, the operations. You may not call it operations, but just know that this is the spirit of what operations entails. When it comes to legal compliance, some of you may be looking at this thinking, well, I don't have a very large company, or maybe I'm just a solopreneur, or we're just a mom and pop, type operation. Doesn't matter. There are certain regulatory things that we all have to adhere to, again, regardless of the size of our business or the industry that we operate in. There are contracts that we're dealing with. Whether you are generating the contract or someone else or some other entity is sending a contract to you. There's also different insurances that we have to take into consideration. So all of that kind of falls under what I call legal compliance. Now, as for the technology piece, you'll notice every single process that's listed here has a star next to it, because that's really the heart and soul of what we're talking about today, is that digitization. But technology, again, encompasses not only figuring out how to take your operations remote, or if you have to do some certain things in person, how to make it as contactless as possible, but you also have to make sure that you can maintain those different technologies. You have to make sure that your technologies are compatible with each other. Those are just some of the things that we'll talk about as well in more detail. With the accounting piece, even if you're a nonprofit, you are taking in money. That money has to be managed. You have to also pay money out to other vendors and suppliers. So that's what the accounting piece entails. For marketing, every one of us has to engage in some type of sales, personal branding, regular company branding activities, without sales and marketing, we have no organizational entity. We have no business. So marketing entails literally everything that it takes to promote your product or your service, because you can have the best product or service in the world, but if no one knows about it, your company will definitely fail. And then lastly, the last bucket we have here is the HR piece. Again, you may be looking at this thinking, I'm a solopreneur, I don't have employees. Even if you don't have employees, there are other people that you likely can outsource work to. So we still need to take those HR related type activities into consideration. So everything from finding the right contractor or person to outsource work to actually crafting a job description, figuring out if you will hire someone, what does that hiring process look like? What does your termination process look like? Do you have to put people on payroll? How will you evaluate their performance? So this, again, everyone, is just really designed to give you a very broad overview and snapshot of all of the functions that you have to think about for your business. And as you go back and once you're able to download this presentation, I want you to take a look at this slide in particular and figure out, do you have a process documented already for each of these areas? And if not, go ahead and start working on that. And then secondly, trying to figure out, is it something that you can do remotely? And I can already tell you the answer to that is yes. It's just a matter of figuring out the different technologies that are out there that you can start leveraging. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the tips. Tip number 1, make a techie your bestie. In other words, become best friends with a technical person as soon as you possibly can, a technologist to be exact. I don't know about any of you, but I have certainly found myself having to troubleshoot certain things that it's just been a nightmare. I'll give you an example. Back in April, one of my websites went down and I could not figure out what was going on. I had to get on the phone with technical support with the company that hosts my company's website, that provides the company's hosting services. And 48 hours later, it wasn't 48 hours straight, but it was over a period of time having to keep calling and talking to different service technicians. I finally got it resolved, but I didn't have that time to devote to that, to be honest with you. I had no choice, but it really was not time well spent. And what I have learned, especially since the pandemic, it's so important to have someone that you can call on fairly quickly to help you troubleshoot different types of things that will happen as you use these different technologies, because it will happen. It's not a matter of if, it will happen. Something will fail. Something may not install properly. You may install one technology only to find that it's not compatible with your computer, or it's not compatible with another technology that you're using. And so for you, as a person that may not be a technologist, it can be especially frustrating because now you have to go online, you get into these different forums, you're trying to figure this out on your own. Whereas if there was someone that you had a very good relationship with, who does know how to troubleshoot some of these things and navigate it fairly quickly, that person can do that for you. Believe me, it is money well spent. But I must also make the caveat that not all technologists are created equal. And what we'll see on this next page here is why I say not all technologists are created equal. So let's first take a look at this people column to the far left. Some of the different people, for those of you who are already in business and for those of you who are thinking about starting a business, these are some of the different types of people that you need to take into consideration. There's web administrators, there's network administrators, you have software developers, you have website developers, you have website designers, And then there are people who specialize in writing and editing copy specifically for the web. Now, some of you may be looking at this saying, well, what's the difference between a software developer and a web developer? Or what's the difference between a web designer and a web developer? Aren't those one and the same? They actually aren't. Some people, and I've had to learn this over the past 15 years, some people are very good at coding. They can code your website, for example. They can make something jump across the screen. They can make something magically appear or disappear upon the prompt of a keystroke. But then your web designers are the people who are really good at the graphical parts of it. They're very good at making it look nice and sleek and branded to whatever your branding is, whether it's for your personal brand or your company's brand. And those two people those skill sets, don't always necessarily lie in the lap of the same person. So you'll find some people who are very, very good, again, at coding, very technical, but then they may not be very good with creating graphics. And then you can have those who are very good with creating graphics who can't really code. So you just have to figure out what you need, what skills you need. Again, going back to that question, what work needs to be done, and then figuring out who's the best person to actually help you accomplish those things. Now let's look at the middle column here for process. Take an inventory of what you already have. And what I mean by that is take stock, literally, of all of the different technologies that you're already using. Determine where there may be different gaps. In other words, there may be some technologies that you need that you may not have, but it's important to take that inventory, because when you do consider investing in additional technologies, you want to make sure that it's going to be compatible with other things that you already have. That's the reason why it's important to take that inventory. Number 3, figure out who should be doing what work, something that we've been talking about at this point. And then number 4, you may be thinking, well, I don't have anyone right now. So then you start figuring out, well, who do you know in your network? Who can you start talking to? You may not know someone specifically, but there may be people around you, coworkers, colleagues, friends, family. Reach out to them and ask them if they know people who can help you with some of the things from a technology standpoint that you need assistance with, and see if you can start developing some type of a rapport with that person so that you can kind of have them, I don't want to say on call 24/7, but have someone that's reliable enough to where when you do run into some type of a technological issue, this is a person that you can easily call on. Now let's look ahead at the tools. Many of these tools are free to use. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with LinkedIn. So that would be a great place to start looking for some of these different types of technologists. There's also Indeed.com. There's Guru.com. Fiverr. I am a huge fan of Fiverr. I'm on Fiverr at least once or twice a week, getting someone to do something for me. I mentioned the tool 1password.com because as you start to digitize your business, as you go remote, whether you're about 75% or even fully 100% remote, you're going to have a ton of different passwords for all of these different apps and software that you're using. 1Password is a solution that allows you to keep all of that information together in one place, so that all you have to remember is 1Password. And once you remember what that 1Password is, it gives you access to all of the other passwords that you have created for different applications. The other tool that you definitely want to make sure that you have at your disposal when you're dealing with technologists is a non-disclosure agreement. This basically will help protect you in the event that this technologist, because they will have access to potentially some very private, confidential, and sensitive information. And you just want to make sure that you have something in writing that they sign that states that they will not reveal any of that information. There's also the non-compete agreement as well as the non-solicitation agreement. So definitely look into that. There's all kinds of templates online. You can go to a site like LegalZoom.com and download a free template there just to get an idea of what the language is in something like a non-disclosure agreement. There's also logmein.com, and Google has the Chrome Remote Desktop. LogMeIn and Chrome Remote Desktop would allow someone to literally log into your computer so that they can troubleshoot something, because they're likely not going to be able to come over to your home if you're working from home. They're going to have to be able to help troubleshoot remotely. These are two applications that are free that would allow them to do that. So definitely take a look at that as well. And if you want to know more information about them. Now let's move on to the second tip. The second tip is know your devices. And this is so important because a lot of times we make assumptions. If you are a Mac user, it's very easy to think, or it's very easy to forget that not everyone is a Mac user, and vice versa. If you are a PC user, you may accidentally recommend some different applications to someone or to the rest of your team or your staff, not realizing that they are Mac users. You also want to take into account your operating system at all times, because you can very easily purchase a piece of software not realizing, again, that it's compatible, and before you know it, you've already scratched off the license key and you can't return it to the store where you purchased the software. So it's very important to know what that operating system is. Something that I have run into recently from personal experience, I just purchased another computer. It has no CD-ROM drive, only 2 USB ports, no Ethernet ports. So I had to purchase all of these different adapters, and I was really annoyed by it. But just know this is how they make computers. This is how they make laptops now. They're ultra thin, and they're ultra thin for a reason, because a lot of the ports that many of us have become accustomed to over the years are no longer available on some of these newer laptops. So just keep these three things in mind as you start to really think about the devices, not only that you are using, but the people that you are collaborating with are using as well. So I'm going to kind of go through this really quickly because we have 5 more tips to get through, and I want to make sure we definitely can open the floor up for questions. So again, you'll see some of the same people written here on the left-hand side as we mentioned in the first tip: the web and network administrators, software and website developers, web designer, as well as the technical writer. As far as the process is concerned, figure out what technologies you need. The second thing you want to do is make sure you understand what bandwidth or space requirements are involved with that particular technology. You can easily download, it seems harmless. We do it with our phones all the time. We download all kinds of apps and then we wonder, well, why does my phone not keep a charge very long? Well, because you have like 50 apps installed on your phone right now. So always take that into consideration as you're starting to install things, whether it be in the cloud or directly to your device. And then also ask yourself, again, is it compatible with things that you're already using? Sometimes things can cause a conflict. I recently had to download Discord. I don't know if anyone on this call is familiar with Discord, but I had to download it in order to participate in an event a couple of weeks ago, and it caused a conflict with something else that I had on my computer. And it took us a long time to figure out that in fact was the reason why I was having trouble downloading Discord in the first place. Now, some tools here to take into consideration. There's this wonderful website called capterra.com. If you ever want to know what types of software are out there in the market for anything that you can possibly imagine, whether you're looking for an HR software, something that has to do with marketing, something that has to do with sales, something that has to do with accounting or billing. Go to that website and just type in the keywords, and it will generate a list of all of the different types of software that are available in the marketplace, ranging from free to paid. So it's an excellent website that serves as a curator, if you will, for all things software. The other thing that you also want to make sure that you know how to find on your different devices, so whether you have a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, or a phone, go into the settings and look at those specifications. That way, if you do find that you're on Amazon, if you're trying to order something online, or if you do go to an actual store and they start asking you some really technical questions like, what's the operating system? What size RAM do you need? All of those types of things, you'll already have that information with you, and you'll be able to have a more intelligent conversation with that salesperson. You also want to make sure that you understand the type of the graphics card specifications that you'll need. When you use things like Zoom and you start using a webcam and all these other amazing tools that are available to us to be able to communicate remotely, they can place a significant strain on bandwidth. So just make sure, again, that your computer can handle whatever applications you're installing onto it. And then, making sure you understand where the websites anytime you install anything, always make sure you bookmark that website associated with that particular application. And then lastly, knowing where to go. If you're a PC user, you can go to the control panel to get a lot of this information about the specifications for your computer. And then if you're a Mac, I think it's in what's called the system preferences. So let's go on to the third tip. Having a disaster recovery and business continuity plan. Murphy's Law basically says, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. And as we've seen, 2020 just seems to be the year where Murphy's Law just seems to be in effect at all times. So the purpose of a disaster recovery and a business continuity plan is literally to start playing devil's advocate. So remember all of those processes that we looked at a few slides back? We had all of these different processes across these 6 main functional areas. What you would want to do is actually play devil's advocate and figure out, okay, well, what would happen if there was a loss of power, if there was a loss of internet, if there was a fire, if there was a flood, if there was theft, cyber theft. You start thinking of these worst case scenarios. If there's a pandemic, what would you do and how would you be able to keep your business afloat and keep things running along as smoothly and again, as seamlessly as possible in the event something catastrophic happens? So that's what I mean by making sure you have a backup plan in place and developing what I call business immunity. Now, as far as the people that you want to get involved, those 6 main areas, if you have some type of representation from each of those 6 areas, operations, legal compliance, HR, accounting, sales and marketing, as well as the technology piece, definitely get those people involved in helping you craft what a backup plan is going to look like. So again, the process, you want to figure out what can go wrong, then determine the steps and the specific tools that you can use to either mitigate it or prevent it from happening altogether. And then once you've determined that and you've documented it, you definitely want to make sure you share it with your team and then implement multiple forms of backup for your data. Going remote means you're doing everything digitally. You have data that you're creating. That data needs to be backed up. Even if you're storing things in the cloud, you still want to make sure you have multiple ways of backing up that data. This first thing here that I have is called a business immunity kit. Now, when you get this presentation and you download it, this is actually a link to some templates that you'll be able to download and customize for your own business. So you'll be able to see what's called that disaster recovery and business continuity plan, as well as what's called an FMEA, and that stands for failure modes and effects analysis, as well as a pre-mortem template. And when you click that link, it will describe in great detail what each of those different tools are, but they are excellent for, again, going through that rigor and that exercise of trying to figure out, well, what can go wrong? And if it does, if this scenario does play out, then what will we do and how will we react? I strongly suggest investing in an external hard drive that has at least 1 to 2 terabytes in storage, steady state. That means it doesn't have mechanical pieces moving around that could potentially break. So you want to buy an external hard drive that has at least 1 to 2, minimum 1 to 2 terabytes of storage capacity, and it is a steady state device. Some of the cloud tools that are out there that you can get for free just to store different types of data that you may have. There's Google Drive, there's Dropbox, there's Microsoft SharePoint for those of you who may be using Microsoft 365. And there's another tool out there called Evernote. There are so many of them, but these are some of the more popular ones that are out there. Let's go on to tip number 4. Cybersecurity insurance. Did you know there was a such thing as cybersecurity insurance? I just found this out a couple of months ago. I had no idea, but let me just say this, 3 really important points here. Whether you think you are in the business of collecting data or not, let me assure you, you are collecting data. Even if it's just a person's first name and their email address, that is data. And it can be compromised. Even if you're storing something in the cloud and you think you have it under lock and key, the minute you go online, the minute you digitize things, you open yourself up for that type of risk. So I would suggest that everyone that's listening to this right now, that's watching, that will watch this in the future, that you make sure you educate yourself about GDPR and CCPA. These are 2 policies that have recently been put in place and enacted across the web. It's very popular in Europe. In fact, it is required that you have to have certain privacy policies on your company's website to let people exactly know how their data is being collected and how that data will actually be used. And it's only a matter of time before it becomes mandated here in America as well. So as far as the people that can help you figure out what cybersecurity insurance is all about, whether or not you will need it, again, if you are digitizing your business, going remote, you absolutely do need to consider strongly getting cybersecurity insurance. So talk to your business insurance agent. There's also whoever your insurance provider might be right now for your company, talk to them specifically as well and ask them if they have some type of a rider or a policy that can be added on to your existing business insurance policy. There's also cybersecurity consultants, data scientists, and then I have see page 11, which have the listing of all of those other types of technologists. Ask them as well what they might know about cybersecurity insurance. Here's something to keep in mind in terms of the process. You want to set and keep office hours. Just because we're all online now and so many of us are working remotely, some people think that that means that you're always available 24/7. But you still need to maintain your office hours. You have to establish boundaries, not only for yourself, but for your staff and your team as well. And respect those boundaries. Another good thing, just in terms of cybersecurity etiquette, if you're going to record at all, let people know. and then let them know whether it's just the audio, let them know in advance if they will be on video as well. That way we can make sure they'll be prepared to be on video. I know we've probably have all read and heard about different horror stories of people forgetting they're on camera or not even realizing that they would be on camera. And then you also want to determine whether or not to grant access to those recordings, and just establish some ground rules and some etiquette for your company as it relates to, again, your cybersecurity presence. Some of the different tools that you want to take into consideration. There's the SSL certificate. So for those of you who may not know what that is, there are certain websites, when you go to them, you will either see HTTP or HTTPS. That S lets you know that it is a secure site. That is what that SSL certificate is showing that your site is not just wide open to the World Wide Web and therefore susceptible to all types of malware. You've actually taken some precautionary measures by actually securing the website. I can tell you right now, especially if you are in the retail space, or if you're going to have some type of an e-commerce component to your business, you definitely want to get that SSL certificate for your website. People do look for that. So the next time you go and you purchase something online, look for that little padlock in the upper left-hand corner, as well as whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. That's if you want to see that S, because that's going to let you know that any information, your credit card information that you're about to enter is at least protected, or they've at least taken some measures to secure your information as much as possible. The next three things, the privacy policy, terms and conditions, as well as a cookies policy. There's a great website that you can go to download some templates that you can use and just kind of customize them and tweak them as you need to, and just attach those to your website. And that website is called rocketlawyer.com. So rocket, like a space rocket, lawyer.com. And that's where you can get those three templates. The next three things that you see here, Jody Daniels, Love Hudson Maggio, and Terica Pearson, those are three ladies that have been on my podcast where we've talked about cybersecurity, data security, compliance, all of these different types of things. And so if you want just even more information and more resources, you can just simply click those links and it'll take you directly to those episodes and you can listen to them for free. And then lastly, if you are looking for some resources to educate yourself about about everything cybersecurity, there's always LinkedIn Learning. They have some great courses in LinkedIn Learning. There's Udemy. There's also Teachable. Communications. Again, this is also very important. This is vital. It's the only way that we can keep things going as we're working remotely, because we don't have the benefit of being in the same space at the same time. So these remote meetings, making sure you have a hardwired or an Ethernet connection. That's the best way to do Zoom. Anytime you're sharing your screen, if you can hardwire to the internet, make sure you do that. Always take into account time zone differences. Again, set those boundaries. I'm not going to be able to go through all of the different tools and the peoples in the process here, excuse me, but just know that, again, you will be able to download this presentation and look over this information at your leisure. Tip number 6, prioritize safety. Let your customers as well as your staff know the rules, and always take into account that every county or parish, state, province, and city, the rules and the regulations are different as it relates to physical distancing and whether or not you wear a mask, whether or not you wear gloves even. Just always take that into account and consideration and communicate whatever policies you establish for your company to both your staff as well as your customers. And again, here are some people, processes, and tools to consider as it relates to prioritizing your safety. Last tip, making sure you set yourself up for success, literally setting up your home office. Ergonomics is so key. We're sitting in front of our computers for even more extended periods of time. It's placing a strain on our limbs, our backs, our necks. Make sure that you set yourself up and your office for success. So I have some tools here that you can take a look at, again, at your own leisure. I definitely encourage you to click this link to some articles by Logitech that actually explain how you can measure your office, measure your distance, the distance between yourself and your computer, for example, just to make sure that you have everything set up to reduce the risk of developing something like carpal tunnel syndrome. Really quickly, because I definitely wanted to make sure I was able to get this in. I actually have an interview coming up with a very important person at Logitech, and they have been kind enough to give away 2 state-of-the-art keyboards as well as 2 state-of-the-art mice. If you would like to participate in this drawing, I am doing the drawing very shortly after this call. So go to this website, businessinfrastructure.tv/b-my-guest, and enter your name so that you can have a chance to win one of these Logitech products. I'm so sorry I had to go through this so quickly. This is a website. If you have any questions about any of the information that we've discussed, this is where you can find me. The best place to go is aliciabutlerpierre.com. From there, you can also see links to the podcast, which is free, as well as the newsletter and my book if you're interested in knowing more about how to create processes. We can do this, guys. I'm so sorry. It looks like we're going to run out of time for questions, but if there are any questions, Donalisa, or Tracy, I can try to take some at this time.
I do have questions. If you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen, we can.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. This was a lot of great information. So we had V from Facebook, and she says, what if you fall into the mom and pop category and you're striving to grow bigger? So I think she's talking about, it was from Facebook. So like, what are some of those processes that she should be considering as they're moving from mom and pop into something bigger?
Okay, so this is about scale, and I don't know specifically what she's talking about. So what usually happens is when companies are faced with scaling, they usually have a situation where they have more business than they can handle. So let's say, for example, you get featured in a certain local magazine, you're on local TV or whatever the case may be. All of a sudden you have this influx of business, and it's not tapering off. It just keeps skyrocketing, which is a great problem to have. And that's when most mom and pops find themselves in a situation where they have to start scaling. So this is when it's going to be extra important that you get all of those processes documented. You figure out who's supposed to be doing the work. Again, the people, the processes, and the tools. Identifying all of that, answering those 4 questions. What work needs to be done? Who's going to do that work? How is it organized? And how is the work supposed to be performed? The best place, honestly, would be to look at my book, because that's exactly what my book talks about, is how to scale a fast-growing business.
Okay, great. So Jamila asked, for the HR function as a smaller business, what resources do you recommend, or what advice do you have as you to make sure that you have the right people, processes, and tools in place? For her, it is the most intimidating area because she feels like making a mistake has a higher cost of failure.
I agree with you, Jamila, because you're taking on extreme risk and you want to get it right the first time around. The best thing that you can do, again, is going through that rigor of figuring out what work needs to be done. And people underestimate the value in that. Really get detailed and nitty gritty, and then start to assign people, because a lot of times what happens is we get excited when people want to work for us or help us out with different things. And we're just so excited that we have people that want to help us, but we don't go through the rigor of really evaluating their skill set and testing them to see if they are a good fit. That's a great way of reducing the risk that someone may not end up working out. again, identifying and getting very granular and very specific about what needs to be done, who should be doing that. A lot of times, even us as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, we're wearing more than one hat, right? We're doing maybe the work of 10 different people, but you don't want your new hires to be doing the work of several different people. They're hired to do one specific type of work, and you just have to make sure that you stay on task with that specific work that you've carved out.
Great. And then Cindy asked, what is the best way to set office hours if we own our own business and often work with clients after they get off work, so after 5 p.m., should we set certain days of the week where we work late?
That's a very interesting question. I'd love to know what type of business you have. If you have, obviously you have to set your business hours around your customer. That goes without saying.
She's a wedding planner.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. I would imagine that you work on weekends a lot, because I'm just taking a guess here. And I don't know if
you want to pop on.
Yes, definitely. I do work a lot of weekends, but I just, office hours is something that I've heard at every different seminar I've gone to and webinar, but it's very hard for me because all of the clients I work with, like, book me because they have full-time jobs or they're in school or they're busy. So they can only meet from 5 to 9, which is like my time that I want to be off of work, but they can't meet earlier. So
right.
I just feel like that's a struggle for me. So I didn't know if you had suggestions. I've seen other people say that I should have something in my email, say I'm available Tuesdays until 9 o'clock, but that's my only late day of the week. Or I just didn't know if you had any feedback.
That's a great idea. That is a great suggestion. I'm just curious, are you, because you don't want to work into the late evenings and on into the night, which I can certainly appreciate, do you have clients that can just take off maybe an hour or two during the day to work with you? I'm just curious, how are those people able to actually interact with you during the day when you would prefer to have your office hours?
Email. So they email me all the time during the day, but as far as like in-person meetings or Zooms, when it can be like a one-on-one, those are always after. And I'm always like, they can take time off to go to the doctor and to go to the dentist. So why can't they take an hour to meet with their wedding planner? Well, maybe I just need to be more strict about it.
Yes, I was just about to say it. You're going to have to just put your foot down, because again, people think because we're all working from home now that they have 24/7 access to you, and they don't. So just be very specific about what your office hours are. Put it on your website. Put it in your email signature, as other people have suggested to you, and people will respect that, and they will find a way to take out 15 minutes or 30 minutes here and there throughout the course of a day, even if it means they have to forfeit their lunch break to be able to have that conversation with you.
Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. It was like drinking from a fire hose, but there was so much that I wanted to share, and I just
No, Alicia,
I hope I didn't overdo it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to share this comment too. Jane Torrey said, this is so useful. I don't want to think about all of these issues, but Alicia is sure helping to make it less intimidating.
Thank you.